A damaged car sat abandoned on a frozen New Hampshire road. Its driver had been there minutes earlier. Now, she was simply gone. Witnesses remembered seeing a young woman standing beside the vehicle. She appeared shaken but not injured. By the time police arrived, the road was empty. No footprints led clearly away from the scene. What happened during those missing minutes would become one of America's most baffling disappearance mysteries. Welcome to Unimaginable True Crimes. Here, we expose the unimaginable, one case at a time. Long before the mystery began, Maura Murray appeared to be building a promising future. She grew up in Massachusetts and developed a reputation for discipline and determination. Sports played a major role in her life, shaping both her confidence and competitive spirit. Friends described her as intelligent, focused, and often intensely independent. She enrolled at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and pursued a demanding academic path. Yet beneath the surface, subtle pressures were beginning to accumulate. Academic demands, personal responsibilities, and private struggles rarely visible to others. Those closest to her would later wonder whether important warning signs had been overlooked. For investigators, understanding Maura's final days would become a critical challenge. Several events occurred shortly before her disappearance, though their significance remains debated. At the time, none of these moments seemed destined for national attention. Then, one unusual decision would place her on a lonely road hundreds of miles from home. But investigators still cannot agree on exactly why she made that journey. This uncertainty would become one of the first major mysteries in the case. The deeper authorities looked into her background, the more questions seemed to emerge. And one unanswered question from her final week would soon change everything. Days before disappearing, Maura sent messages suggesting she would be away from campus for several days. She told professors there had been a family emergency. Investigators later struggled to verify that explanation. At nearly the same time, she made travel-related preparations that raised questions after her disappearance. Some believed she intended a short retreat. Others suspected she was trying to escape mounting pressures. One thing was clear: Maura left campus voluntarily and began driving north. The route would take her through rural New England roads lined with forests and small towns. Hours later, witnesses would place her hundreds of miles from where she started. But there was one detail investigators could never fully explain. No one knows exactly what was going through Maura's mind during that final drive. As darkness settled over the mountains, the mystery moved toward its most critical moment. Shortly after 7 p.m., something happened on a sharp curve in Haverhill, New Hampshire. A passing motorist noticed a vehicle that appeared to have crashed. The driver was still present, standing beside the car in the freezing air. Witnesses later recalled that she appeared shaken but refused assistance. She reportedly insisted that emergency services did not need to be contacted. Yet the witness became concerned and decided to notify authorities anyway. The decision would trigger a timeline investigators have analyzed for decades. Only a few minutes separated the witness's departure and the arrival of police. Those missing minutes would become the most important period in the entire case, because when officers reached the crash scene, Maura Murray was nowhere to be found. Her disappearance appeared to have occurred within an extraordinarily narrow window of time. This is where the case takes a disturbing turn. Searchers found personal belongings inside the vehicle, but no sign of its driver. Several clues suggested she had intended to continue traveling before the crash occurred. Yet nothing at the scene clearly explained how she vanished so quickly. Authorities immediately faced two possibilities: voluntary departure or something far more troubling. The surrounding wilderness added another layer of uncertainty to the investigation. But what happened next shocked investigators. Despite immediate efforts, no clear trail led searchers away from the crash location. The deeper authorities looked, the more impossible Maura Murray's disappearance seemed to become. Before we continue, remember to subscribe for more true crime investigations. By sunrise, investigators realized they were no longer dealing with a routine traffic accident. Search teams began combing the surrounding woods, hoping to find signs of Maura's movements. The terrain was harsh, remote, and covered in fresh winter snow. Investigators expected footprints. What they found instead raised even more questions. There appeared to be no clear trail leading away from the crash site. For many investigators, that detail immediately became one of the case's biggest mysteries. If Maura had walked into the woods, why were obvious tracks so difficult to find? If someone picked her up, who were they and why did nobody see it happen? The investigation quickly expanded beyond the crash scene itself. Authorities began reconstructing every known hour leading up to Maura's disappearance. Receipts, phone records, witness statements, and travel plans were carefully reviewed. Each new clue seemed promising, yet every lead eventually stalled. This is where another troubling possibility entered the investigation. Could someone have encountered Maura during those missing minutes after the crash? Investigators examined local residents, passing motorists, and anyone known to be nearby, but no suspect emerged with evidence strong enough to explain the disappearance. The case remained trapped between competing theories. Some believed she voluntarily left the area and started a new life. Others argued the evidence pointed toward an accidental death in the wilderness. And a third possibility suggested she encountered someone with dangerous intentions. No theory fully explained every known fact, and one inconsistency continued to trouble investigators. Witness accounts differed on certain details from that winter evening. Minor discrepancies may seem insignificant, but they can reshape an entire investigation. Years later, those inconsistencies would still be debated by researchers and investigators. Meanwhile, Maura's family refused to stop searching for answers. Public attention gradually grew, bringing new tips and renewed interest, yet none of the incoming information produced a definitive breakthrough. The mystery seemed to deepen with every passing year. Then, investigators revisited evidence from an entirely different perspective. But what investigators discovered next changed everything. New searches focused on locations that had previously received less attention. Advanced technology offered opportunities unavailable during the original investigation. Ground searches resumed, fueled by hope that critical evidence might still exist. The renewed efforts generated headlines across the country. For a moment, it seemed the mystery might finally be solved. Then, the case delivered another frustrating setback. Promising leads once again failed to produce definitive answers. The disappearance remained unsolved despite years of relentless effort. Yet one overlooked detail from the earliest hours of the case was about to raise even more questions. Years after the disappearance, investigators continued revisiting the earliest evidence, searching for anything that might have been missed. One question remained at the center of every discussion: what happened during those missing minutes? The timeline itself appeared straightforward. The explanation behind it did not. Some researchers focused on the possibility that Maura left the immediate area on foot. Others believed the evidence pointed toward an encounter with another person. Neither theory fully accounted for every known detail. As interest in the case grew, independent researchers uncovered new perspectives on old evidence. But every new theory seemed to generate even more unanswered questions. This is where the mystery took another unexpected turn. Several areas near the crash site became the focus of renewed searches. Specialized equipment was brought in to examine locations previously considered unlikely. Investigators hoped time had not erased the clues they needed. For a brief moment, optimism returned to the case. Then the evidence once again refused to provide a clear answer. The mystery remained suspended between possibility and proof. Meanwhile, investigators continued analyzing witness accounts from that February night. One detail repeatedly surfaced during those reviews. The disappearance happened so quickly that it seemed almost impossible. That narrow window fueled speculation that someone may have offered assistance. Yet no confirmed witness ever reported seeing Maura enter another vehicle. This contradiction became one of the most debated elements of the case. Researchers revisited photographs, maps, and environmental conditions from that evening. What they discovered next added another layer to the mystery. Certain assumptions that guided the early investigation began facing renewed scrutiny. The farther experts dug into the case, the more complex it appeared. Public fascination continued to grow, keeping pressure on investigators. Families, journalists, and researchers remained determined to uncover the truth. But despite decades of attention, certainty remained elusive. Then another major search effort reignited hope. Teams focused on areas that earlier searches may not have thoroughly covered. The operation generated renewed headlines and public anticipation. For investigators, the possibility of a breakthrough felt closer than ever. Then the results arrived, and once again, the mystery refused to yield a definitive answer. The case remained suspended between competing explanations. Accident, voluntary disappearance, or criminal involvement, none could be conclusively proven. That uncertainty has become the defining feature of the Maura Murray mystery. Yet one final review of the evidence would help clarify what investigators believe most likely happened. Not certainty, not proof, but a clearer picture than before. And that picture would shape the final chapter of this extraordinary mystery. After years of investigation, one reality remained unchanged. No confirmed sighting of Maura Murray has ever been verified after the crash. That fact narrowed the mystery to a remarkably small place and time. Everything investigators know with confidence occurred before police arrived. Everything after that point enters a territory filled with uncertainty. This is where the case divides into competing explanations. One theory suggests Maura left the crash scene voluntarily and entered the surrounding wilderness. Supporters point to the remote terrain, freezing temperatures, and limited visibility that night. But critics argue that extensive searches should have revealed stronger evidence. A second theory focuses on the possibility that she accepted a ride from a passing motorist. That explanation could account for how she disappeared so quickly. Yet investigators never found evidence identifying such a driver. Another possibility involves circumstances investigators may never be able to fully reconstruct. The challenge is not a lack of theories, it is a lack of proof. But what happened next shocked many who followed the case. Despite intense scrutiny, no definitive suspect was ever identified, no confession emerged, no verified sighting resolved the mystery. The strongest conclusion may also be the most frustrating one. Investigators can identify possibilities, but they cannot establish certainty. More than 2 decades later, the critical question remains unanswered. What truly happened to Maura Murray after the crash remains one of America's most enduring mysteries. Years turned into decades, but the search for answers never truly ended. For Maura's family, every unanswered question carried the weight of another passing year. Investigators changed, search methods evolved, yet the mystery remained. The case became one of the most discussed disappearances in modern American history. Thousands of people studied the evidence, hoping to discover the missing piece. But some mysteries resist easy answers, no matter how determined the search becomes. Today, the road where Maura disappeared appears ordinary to passing travelers. Yet for those who know the story, that stretch of road represents an unanswered question, a question that continues to challenge investigators, researchers, and everyone seeking the truth. If this case disturbed you, the next one is even shocking. On a quiet Sunday morning in 1982, 12-year-old Johnny Gosch set out to deliver newspapers, just as he had many times before. Minutes later, he vanished. More than 40 decades later, one question still haunts investigators. What really happened to Johnny Gosch? Click on the video appearing on your screen now to watch the full episode.